What's up, folks, and welcome to Indie Ramble. So, I got another game for you today from the latest incarnation of Atari. We've talked about them a reasonable amount on this channel over the last few months, and the latest version of the company, Atari, has been through a lot of different owners over the years. But the latest version of it that Wade Rosen is running has been doing some pretty interesting stuff, and it kind of feels like the company has sort of a new vibe and a new just energy about it. They're going very, very slow, but it sounds like they're doing things in the right direction and maybe trying to do finally something interesting and not scammy with the Atari name. And this is one of these things. So this is Mr. Run and Jump, and the history of this is very interesting. The Mr. Run and Jump, the sort of original game, if you will, was a brand new Atari 2600 game made by a solo dev. You can actually pre-order the cartridge for that right now on Atari's website, which I thought was kind of interesting. But at the same time, they decided to make an actual full game out of it for modern systems, if you will. I actually don't know which came first, the Fan 2600 game or this. I think this came after. But this is developed by Graphite Lab, which is a studio that's done quite a bit of stuff, actually. Quite a number of different projects. And I've covered one of their games on the channel before, actually, as well. And this is a precision platformer through and through, in the vein of like a Super Meat Boy or a Celeste or something like that. This is the intro, which I think is pretty cool because it actually gives a little nod to the 2600 game. I don't know if this is exactly what that's going to look like, but you sort of do the first little level of this, then it does this cool transition to the sort of modern style that I wanted to show you. I just think this is a really cool thing. But yeah, it's a precision platformer and everything that entails. It starts off, relatively straightforward, but it keeps layering on different mechanics and enemies as you go, to the point where it will get extremely challenging. And for those who really want to put in the time to get most of the unlockables, there's a final world in this that can get truly, truly brutal if you want. I think precision platformers are cool, but I always tend to respect them from a distance because I don't have the time or the patience to get good at them in the way that they demand. That's just a me thing, that's not here's the little transition. I think this is really cool. That's really just a me thing. I think the genre is cool. I just, I can't get good enough at it. So I tend to watch a lot of precision platformers from a distance with a lot of respect. But I saw this one come up and it looked so neat that I was like, I want to give this a try. And I can definitely say it is a precision platformer. It's going to demand a lot of you, but it does have some modern quality of life amenities to it that can make it easier for those who don't have the time to put into it to get really good at it, though those do come with some limitations. I think it's really cleverly designed. And yeah, as you've seen here, as we're transitioning in, I really love this sort of bloomy neon vibe it's got going for it. Everything in this world is just really colorful and looks really cool. It's got a nice little popping soundtrack to it. And despite the fact that it's a very difficult game and you are trying to deal with something that could damage the world, as you're seeing here, it's just got a really nice vibe to it. So this is taking us into the first world. So like I said, the game likes to layer on a lot of new stuff, and as that comes about, you can talk to Mr. Watch and Learn here, who is your little sort of tutorial sage, if you will. And you'll see that there's also a stopwatch icon there. Once you've beaten a level, you can go back and run it in a time trial mode if you want. There are leaderboards, if you will, but it's just a list of your own times. They're not online, they're local only, and there's not even like initials attached to them. So they're all going to be times that you set and you're going to be kind of racing against yourself, but it's still a nice little thing that's there. Every level that you go through, this is going to look really easy because it's the first level, but every level that you go through has a number of these little shard collectibles that you can pick up. You don't have to get them all, but if you're a perfectionist, you'll want to. And there's also challenge orbs. So see, if I press the Y button there, you see those. I've actually gotten them all in this level, but I'll show you what that looks like. I am playing this game with a controller. I can confirm you can play it with a keyboard because I did so on my gaming laptop for a little while. Don't really recommend that. I think the controller is ergonomically a much better way to play a game like this, but they took the time to put in keyboard support, which is nice. So if you want to get all the challenge orbs in a level, you have to look for these sort of red areas that are off to the side. And in a lot of levels, these will be fairly hard to get to. And then once you get in there, you have to go through a harder challenge. Again, first level. That's why that didn't look too hard. And if you can go through that, you get the challenge orb. Now, what you need the challenge orbs for is you need those in order to unlock the various levels in the Dark World, which is the sort of uber hardcore sort of post-story mode challenge world that's in this. You don't need them for anything else, but if you want 100% this piece, then that's what you're going to have to do. You see, it's giving a little bit of tutorial here. Now, there's only a couple of buttons in this game, so if you hold down basically any of the triggers or the X button, you do a couple of different things. If you're in place, you can turn into a little morph ball like that to get into tiny spaces. If you hold it down and then jump, you get sort of a more accelerated jump. And then when you're in the air, if you press it, you do a dash like that. You can also double jump, but only once. So you see how I sort of turned from white to gray there? So once you've used up your double jump, you can't use it again until you touch the ground. So that's something to keep in mind. There's a lot of wall jumping in this. In the later levels, you will have to dash yourself through a lot of very tiny spaces, and very quickly in some cases. And that's something that you've got to be mindful of. It will take a lot of repetition. You have unlimited lives, so when you die, all you do is go back to the start of the screen that you're on, not the actual entire level, at least not in these early stages. I can't speak to the Dark World. I'm never going to get there. But you will restart at the screen that you're on, so you're not going to have to redo an entire level, which is nice. And yeah, if you die, you press a button, you instantly go back. There's no loading screen. There's no delay of any kind whatsoever, which is excellent. That's what you want out of something like this. So there we go. We get that. And then, whoops. So yeah, you go through that. It's all very quick. It's very responsive. I will say a little bit that, in the tail, I have a cat walking in front of me. I will say a little bit that I kind of wish that the game maybe had a few more buttons than it does. Like, for example, the move that you need to do here, where you stand in place and you kind of do a spring-loaded jump. I actually wish that was on another button, because if you are moving even in the slightest little bit, you will do a dash instead of that charge jump. And I've had a couple of levels where you have to do the charge jumps in rapid succession, and way too much I missed it and dashed into spikes or something because of that sort of frame perfection that it needs. I kind of wish they'd make that a little more forgiving. But other than that, they're pretty good. So you've got a handful of levels here in each of the different colored worlds, basically 3 full levels. Some of these can get very long in terms of the number of screens. Some of them are not so bad, others are, and you can kind of tell by the number of shards they have available. And then every world has what's called a void world. And this is interesting because what it does, I'm actually going to turn on the timer here. It's a world where you got a wall closing in, and you got a haul. So you got to move, because if you take too long on any one screen, it's going to get you. But the wall's position sort of resets, or the void's position is what it's called, resets every time you enter a new screen. So it's not like if you enter a new screen and it's halfway towards you that it's going to start halfway towards you, if that makes sense. You only have to worry about outrunning the void on the screen you're on. Again, not within the entire scope of the level, which is really nice. I appreciate that. So, and yeah, this is a single level where you got no time to, you don't really have time to think. You got to move and you got to hustle to get to the end before the void swallows you, and then that will unlock the next world. Pretty straightforward concept, but especially again in some of the I've beaten 3 of the worlds so far, and yay, some of these are challenging. Though I did get all the challenge orbs in the most recent Void world, which I was rather proud of myself for, if I do say so myself. So yeah, it's challenging, but the nice thing is it's one of these games. We've talked before about how important it is that when you're playing a really fast-paced, really challenge-heavy game like this, that it doesn't make you wait because in between lives. So if you die, it's important that you don't have to deal with long load times or long delays or countdowns or anything like that, because if you do, anything like that, you give the player time to reflect on their failure and get frustrated. If you make it so that you just press a button and you're instantly back in the action without even having to think about it with, again, no get ready prompt, no countdown, no loading screen, it's just press a button and go. I think that's really smart because you'll have maybe enough time to give a little, because you died, but you won't have enough time. If you have any time to think about it, that's when you start to get mad, and that's when you start to feel like you want to rage quit and go, screw this game. And it is absolutely vital in a game like this that you reduce that time to friction, if you will, as much as possible. And this nails it perfectly. You press the button and you go back in. This was clearly made by people who understand how I was about to say a prison platformer. I mean, depending on your perspective. But this game was clearly made by people who understand how a precision platformer has to be designed in order to be tough without being rage-inducing. And I'm really impressed with what they've done here, actually. I think they did a fantastic job with that. Now, we talked a little bit about quality of life improvements before. So what do I mean by that? Well, there is an option that you can turn on. Actually, the middle part, it's got multiple settings, and the middle setting is on by default. But you can turn it off if you go, whoa, that was close. So what you can do is you can turn on options. Feels a little bit inspired by Nintendo, actually. If you played some more recent Nintendo releases, like some of the newer Mario titles and things like that, you might recall that they have a thing that will happen where if you fail in a particular area too much, it will pop up a little thing going, hey, could we give you a little hand here? And it'll do something for you that'll make it a little bit easier to get past the area that you're stuck in so that you can get past that and move on. And this does that. You can make it so that it pops up those prompts either frequently, infrequently, or never if you want. And those can be either, if you fail a section too often, popping up invulnerability that will just allow you to sort of brute force your way past an obstacle that's bothering you, or it'll put a checkpoint in the screen, and so that rather than doing the whole screen over again, you're doing it only from a certain point. The game will also occasionally just show you a ghost of one of the guys moving, so that you can see that there. So you see I've got my time here, and if I want a silver medal, then I need to go for way better time than that, But yeah, so it will nudge you a little bit, and every time those things pop up, they're optional. You don't have to use them. And the downside of using them, it doesn't seem to do anything to hurt achievements, at least not in terms of level completion achievements, because in one of the last levels of one of the worlds, I accidentally actually turned one of those things on. I swear to God, it was an accident. I hadn't used them to that point. I'm not lying. Stop staring at me like that. Anyway, yeah, so it has, so if you use them, it won't affect progression-based achievements, but it will turn off collectibles. So you can't collect the challenge orbs, and you can't collect the shards here that give you the shattered orbs. If you do things like pick up the invincibility power-up, it will only be effective for the screen that you're on. So once you move on to the next screen, it's gone, and that sort of assist timer, if you will, resets. So you'll have to fail a bunch more times on the next screen in order to do that. My experience in this has been that in some of the levels, there's just been a particular couple of screens that want a certain movement type or something like that I'm not good at, where I failed more often than others. And then usually when I move on to the next screen, or the next couple of screens even, I just kind of am able to blitz through it. So yeah, these frogs are like an enemy thing where you see the slime is where they jump and you have to avoid them, little things like that. And yeah, I haven't found myself in a position where I'm like, oh God, I'm going to need the assist all the time to get through this. In the later worlds, I'm sure that's going to start to happen. But it's nice that those are there. So this game is still really challenging for the people who want that. But for the people who want it to be a little bit more casual, or who want a challenge but not an uber challenge, it gives you a little bit of an option to get through that without throwing it in your face, and they can make it so that it's totally avoidable for the people who don't want it. If you want the challenge, if you want to keep going until you perfect a run, then you have that option. And I like that. I think that's a smart design decision to make this game a little bit more accessible without taking away the heart of what it's intending to be, right? I think in terms of precision platformers, this is definitely not the hardest one. I don't think so. There was a checkpoint there. Now, to be fair, that was a little harder to avoid than maybe it could have been. But, again, you could turn it off if you want. I think this is definitely not the hardest precision platformer. I don't think it's even the hardest mainstream one. Based on some of the runs I've seen in Super Meat Boy, I'm going to guess that this is probably harder than that, or not as hard as that. Though it might be later on, who knows? I'm not an aficionado of the genre, right? But, yeah, it's just, I really love the presentation. I really love the look. The soundtrack is really cool. This game, despite being brutally difficult, just has kind of a cute vibe to it, you know, and in a way that I really enjoy. You know, it's a non-violent game, other than, you know, when you pick up these little gems and destroy the void that's pursuing you. It's non-violent, though you're not killing anything, and when you die, you just disappear. You know, there's really nothing to it. So here's a challenge room for this area here. And some of these do get really tough. Now, I picked up that orb already. That's why it's gray instead of white, or red, I should say. So I actually managed to get that one. But yeah, it's just, I just really love the vibe of it. It's not a modern retro game. It's a straight up modern game, but it has enough of a vibe that it feels like a modern retro game, if that makes any sense. And I just like what they're going for here. Graphite Lab is a team that, despite the fact that they have put out a very large volume of product, clearly still understands how to make stuff quality. They're not a shovelware developer. They're talented and they know how to make good stuff. And if this is an example of what we can get from new Atari, I actually really like it, because it's a new game, an entirely new game. This is not like the Atari Recharge series where they're putting it. See what I'm talking about here? This is where you need to do the frame perfect thing on very short timing in order to jump. And I get screwed on that too many times because it's a little too frame precise. But yeah, this is not an old game. Like, this is not like the Atari Recharge series where they're taking their old games and putting a modern spin on them. A pretty good modern spin, don't get me wrong, but nonetheless, this is a wholly original idea, and it looks like, at least as best as I can tell from the history, something that came out of a fan project, basically. A guy who wanted to challenge himself to make a new Atari 2600 game, and they went, hey, how about we make an actual full game out of that too, to sort of tie it in together. So it's a mix of old and new, but at the same time, it's a totally new IP. It's not an old Atari game from the 70s that's being given a modern coat of paint. I love that. I think that's a really, really smart fusion of old and new that can, in its way, have appeal to people from both eras. You know, I am old, and I'm not a boomer, but I am old enough. I had an Atari 2600 when they were new. You know, I know what those really old Atari games were like, and I still like those. I also like this, and because it feels like an old school Atari game, even though it isn't. I feel like it's interesting. Wade Rosen's who's running Atari right now, is a little bit of a nebulous figure. I listened to an interview that he did recently with Jared the Completionist. I'll actually link it in the description below so you can watch it for yourself. He's a fascinating guy because his career, he's a huge gamer, but his business history is not in video games. He actually started and exited several tech companies. And it was actually because of the money he got from those companies that he was able to purchase Atari from its prior management, who was not good, and because he believes it's an important brand culturally that needs to be revived and given and treated with the level of respect it deserves, and that by doing that, he can also make money at it. And I think it's a really cool vision. I think it's really what Atari has always needed to bring the brand back to something that's truly respectable, rather than, you know, other than its history, Atari's been kind of regarded as a joke for the last number of years because they were trying to do things like blockchain casinos and hotels with it. But yeah, I think they're just doing something really cool. And if this is an example of what they're going to do with that vision, then I'm all for it, because I think this is a great way you take Atari into a new modern era, and especially an era where games are hyper competitive. You know, in the indie game space in particular, it's hyper competitive, it's hard to get noticed, but Atari's doing something that really only they can, which is leveraging their history to also make cool new stuff. And I really like it. But even if you have no attachment or care for the Atari name or legacy whatsoever, this is still a good precision platformer. It's well put together, it runs great, it was designed by people who clearly understand what makes one of these good. And if you are a fan of the genre, Atari lover or not, I think you should pick this up, because I think you're going to get a good experience out of it. This is not something that was just slapdash together with the Atari name on it to make a quick buck. This is something that clearly does have passion behind it. And yeah, am I going to finish it? And no. I just, again, precision platformers, I don't have the time or the patience. But it's a genre I respect, and I think this one does well by it, and that's why I wanted to show it off to people. So yeah, that's Mr. Run and Jump. It is out now all over the place. I definitely recommend giving it a look. I think there's a good number of hours in here for this. You know, based on time of recording, it's got very few Steam reviews, so I don't know how well it's selling, but I hope it does well, because this is a symbolic of a new vision for an iconic gaming brand that needs a good comeback, and this could be that. I hope they're able to make that work. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I do appreciate it. If you like what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things. Those do really help the channel out a great deal. Leave a comment down below. Tell me, what do you think of this? And also, what are some other precision platformers that you remember very fondly? In particular, maybe some lesser known ones that I haven't talked about here. You know, we all know Super Meat Boy, we all know Celeste, but there's obviously many more of them out there. And I'd love to hear maybe what some of the lesser known ones are. Yeah. And as always, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction for multiple variety streams a week. I cover other indie games as well as true retro stuff over there, including a bunch of games that are better suited to streaming than YouTube. We have a fantastic community there, and I would love to see you be a part of it. Thanks again, everybody, and I will see you on the next Indie Ramble. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take her easy.